So one of the questions we got quite a lot was like, oh, well, do you collect sale price, like actual sale price, which is obviously really difficult because you obviously need to go to every dealer and say, hey, what did you sell this for? And the dealer is going to be super sketchy because, you know, the price that they sell it for affects the finance deal that they've got, and there's all kinds of other things wrapped into it. So we went for the last listed price as the kind of the proxy for the market price.
Right. Yeah, that's, you know, the exact same criticism. One of the biggest questions, one of the biggest concerns that, you know, we get at WatchCharts, because we do the exact same thing, right? We take all the listings, we take a snapshot of the market, and once we've detected that a listing is sold, in many cases we don't actually know the final sale price, right? And people will say like, okay, well, how can you accurately, you know, estimate pricing if you don't know the actual sale price? And we do the exact thing. We take the last known listed price, right? But it sounds like, you know, for the car world, like this was already some sort of, you know, practice even beforehand, right? Because like you said, there was a big auction market, and then people would just sort of, you know, estimate some sort of additional premium for the delta between the auction price and the actual, you know, market price. It's a similar sort of thing with this, you know, last known listing price versus actual sales price. You know, that's what we tell people. You might do something similar. You might estimate, you know, based on whatever your perception is, what this, you know, reasonable delta might be, and that'll get you, you know, maybe closer to the market price. But yeah, how do you address those types of, you know, concerns when it comes to like establishing trust and credibility with, you know, both consumers and the, you know, dealers and other business clients that are using your product?
Yeah. It's a very important thing is trust in the value that you've got. And so it was mainly with our sort of dealer customers that this was kind of the biggest concern, because they know the market. They were very on it when they saw, well, you know, this very specific model of, you know, Audi A6 is way out of whack with everything else. So, you know, listening to what they're saying it was quite key, so we could sort of delve into kind of, well, okay, well, why is this out of sync? But I think, you know, going back to the point I made before, like understanding that like there's your value and there's your pricing strategy. And so the valuation that we would give, it's an anchor. So that's kind of, you're following a trend, and that's what your pricing strategy is anchored to. So we can help you with all the other stuff around how you can price and all the kind of the tactical stuff around, like, as you're pricing it through time. But I think that's really the thing, is that the valuation is just kind of your starting point, and it's allowing you to know if it's going up or down in value. But it's not the only number. And I think this was the thing that we struggled with, is that the industry had been so baked into like, oh, well, we've just got to know this number. It's like, well, the number changes, and you change that number depending on like what your goals are, your sales targets, those kind of things. So I think that's the first thing, is understanding like that's the dynamic, and like we can help you in other ways. But really what we did is we would help. That's how the proof is in the pudding. We would sort of sit down with the dealer and say, right, this is kind of what, you know, you've told us what your goals are. This is what we suggest. Let's test it out. Let's see how it goes, and let's see what works for you, and see if it helps or not. And when it did, they were happy. They made more money. You know, they were more informed, and it worked.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that's, you know, definitely a shift in sort of the dynamics of how people think about the market, right? Both the car and the watch businesses, you know, are often very gut feel, right? We get a lot of the same feedback from dealers saying that, oh, you know, how can these guys know the pricing? Because they just look at, you know, indexing listings online. We are in the trenches every single day, you know, looking at prices, selling and buying watches. You know, we know the market better than any of these guys. But I think the point is like, you know, for these dealers, as I said, because the market is so fragmented, like a lot of them are dealing with a very, very small set of data points, especially when it comes to the more, you know, obscure, more rare models, which are not even necessarily like the ones that are less desirable. Like there's a lot of watches from Patek Philippe and Audemars Piguet, you know, it's just they're so low volume that a dealer might only sell, you know, 3 of these watches over like a 3-year period, right? They'll sell like 1 a year or something like that, right? It's also, a challenge on our side, even from an aggregate standpoint, because even when you're looking across, all the marketplaces, all the platforms, and all the listings, there's still maybe only, like 50, 100, 150 data points, right, in a year. And, the other thing, talking about, again, about pricing versus valuation, is that when you're looking at the price that these are listed at on the market, all of those are reflective of some sort of pricing strategy, right? Especially when it comes to this very obscure stuff, how quickly does a dealer want to sell is a big driving force for what price they're listing at. So you can see this very, very large range. There might be like 10 listings in the market, but the cheapest one is like half the price of the more expensive one, right? So I think it's like you said, we're just trying to give an anchor price, and we also give a price spread as well in our own data, saying, here's what we believe is the market valuation, and then here's a range. And obviously, if the amount of say transactions is lower, and if there's a big spread in the pricing, then that range is going to be larger as well. So I think that that's one of the big issues in terms of like how dealers and maybe other consumers are perceiving our product. And yeah, I think that it'll be interesting to see, how do you, I guess that's a question for you, like, how was there any challenge in, convincing dealers to take a more data-driven approach rather than like a gut feel approach? And if so, like what was the evolution of that process?
Yeah, massively. It's very old business, right? It's very traditional. And yeah, there's lots of gut feel, and because there had to be. I think that's the thing is, until relatively recently, there weren't the tools that exist today. There wasn't the data set or the ability to crunch numbers the way that you do until very, very recently. So the incumbents that I talked about previously, they were manually creating these books. They were manually editing and tweaking the numbers. So that's kind of been at least in the UK, that's been the mainstay. So kind of moving to this fully automated thing is pretty scary in terms of, if you're going to bet the farm on it. You have to build the trust there. And I think, it comes from that. There are categories of things. There are things where like your bread and butter cars. So in the UK, like a Ford Fiesta or a Vauxhall Corsa, like super popular, they're just like the car that everyone buys because it's cheap and cheerful and it gets you from A to B. And then you've got your extreme sort of supercars that very similar to your watches. There aren't very many, and realistically, it's kind of like what someone will pay for it at that point,
right? Yeah,
because you just have so little data to go on, and those cars tend to be so they're so unique in fact that they'll have certain things or they won't. And then you've got the middle spread, and that's kind of where the bulk of the money is to be made, and that's where the data is important, because you can't. It's maybe not stuff that's as common, but it's not super rare. And so that's where your data can really help you out, is the fact that you can see market trends, you can see where it's changing. So, and at least you can just get some awareness of what your competitors are pricing those things at.